And joining me now is Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, who campaigned with the president on Saturday in Atlanta. Senator Warnock, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning. Happy Sunday morning to you.
Happy Sunday morning to you. Thank you so much for being here. Well, you just heard what former President Trump had to say about President Biden, an indication that this campaign is already shaping up to be a brutal one. How should President Biden respond to those types of attacks, Senator?
Well, sadly, if I were to ask you, are you surprised? Is anybody surprised by what we heard coming out of the mouth of the former president? The answer is no. This is who Donald Trump is. And I have to tell you, as the father of a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, it's terrible when you have to bleep the words from a former president. But Joe Biden is tried, tested, and true. He's seen this nonsense before. He saw it and experienced it the other night with the other side heckling in the middle of the president's speech. And he pressed on because he's not focused on himself. Unlike his challenger, he's not focused on what this election means for him as Donald Trump runs from the jailhouse. He's focused on what this election means for the American people, the people of Georgia. And he spoke with power the other night about the future.
Well, let's talk about your home state now, Georgia. President Biden won it narrowly in 2020 by fewer than 12,000 votes. Now polls show that he's actually trailing former President Trump. You're not going to be on the ballot this year. What do you say to Democrats who say they are afraid that Georgia is out of reach?
I say soldier on. As someone who has had his name on the ballot in Georgia 5 times in 3 years, I know a little bit about what it means to run in Georgia. And the road to the White House leads straight through Georgia. He won by 12,000 votes or less than 12,000 votes. Votes, by the way, the ex-president tried to steal. But he's president of the United States, and Georgia's going to show up in a strong way for Joe Biden.
Let me ask you about this twist we learned about this week. No Labels is reportedly considering Georgia's former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan to potentially lead a unity ticket. How could that impact the results of Georgia? Could that make it all but nearly impossible for Joe Biden to win?
Listen, it's still relatively early in the campaign season. And I think that the more we hear from the Donald Trump that we just heard from a little while ago, the clearer it's going to be to people that at the end of the day, this is a binary choice. And the question is, do you want the America of January 5th that sent its first black senator from Georgia, its first Jewish senator from Georgia to the United States Senate? Or do you want the America of January 6th, pushed forward by a president who continues to advance the big lie about the election? And behind that lie is the lie that this new multiracial democracy does not get to determine the future of the country. He's looking backward. Joe Biden is looking forward. And I think at the end of the day, the people of Georgia will see that choice, that binary choice, very clearly. And they'll do the right thing for Joe Biden as they did for me.
But, Senator, if No Labels were to run a unity ticket, one that included Jeff Duncan, could that not spoil the race for Joe Biden? You don't deny that, do you?
Listen, I think that the people of Georgia are at the end of the day asking who's in the fight for them. And as I sat the other night and listened to the president's speech, I'll tell you, I said to my colleagues, I don't know if that was Joe Biden or Joe Lewis, because the man came out fighting and he never let up, and he's not going to let up between now and November. I think the people of Georgia will recognize that when it came time to forgive the student debt of people who've just been mired in debt, young people who have had a mortgage just trying to deal with their future, that Joe Biden, with one hand behind his back, with the Republicans suing him, did $138 billion of student debt relief. That's closing the racial wealth gap. The man's got receipts,
Yeah.
and the people of Georgia will show up for him in November.
Senator, let me ask you about this. Neither President Biden nor Vice President Harris have committed to President Biden debating Mr. Trump. Do you think the American people deserve to see these two candidates debate in a general election?
Oh, listen, I think the debate is already underway. And again, this is a binary choice.
But, Senator, should they formally debate? You know what I'm asking, Senator. Should there be a formal debate between President Biden and former President Trump?
I support debates, but I'm not a part of the president's campaign. I represent the people of Georgia in the United States Senate. And I think we're going to hear a fierce argument in the months ahead. And the contrast couldn't be clearer.
Let's talk about the war in the Middle East now. In his State of the Union address, President Biden announced that the U.S. is building a port to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza. It could take as long as 60 days. Doctors Without Borders called it, quote, a glaring distraction from the real problem, Israel's indiscriminate and disproportionate military campaign and punishing siege. Is sending more aid enough, Senator, when innocent civilians are being killed and are dying every day?
Listen, we have got to find our way quickly to the path that leads to peace. That's why the other night on the floor of the United States Senate, I pushed for a ceasefire. I know the president is working hard to get to a ceasefire. Mr. Netanyahu has got to recognize that we've already seen the deaths of some 30,000 Palestinians, many of them innocent women, men, and children. You know, I think about this not just as a senator and even not just as a pastor, but as a father. Last night, as I was putting my own children to bed and dealing with my son as he was dealing with an incessant cough, I thought about parents in Gaza. It's a terrible thing. As a parent, when your kid is sick. And here I was just dealing with a cold. And I thought about the fact that there are parents in Gaza right now who are dealing with the ordinary challenges that children deal with, who have seen amputations of children without anesthesia. There are children who are wounded with no living weapons, with no living relatives. And so we've got to find our way to peace quickly, while at the same time trying to get humanitarian aid in there as quickly as possible.
You take me to my next point. In an interview with MSNBC's Jonathan Capehart, President Biden said he is, quote, never going to leave Israel. Do you think there should be a red line when it comes to supporting Israel?
Well, I think that we've got to continue to lean on Mr. Netanyahu. We've got to insist that this cannot continue in this way. The way a war is carried out is important.
But do you have a red line, Senator? Do you have a red line, Senator? Is there a red line for you, particularly when it comes to going into Rafah, for example?
I stated that very clearly the other night on the floor of the United States Senate, that I think that to go into Rafah, the humanitarian experts, the folks who are trying to get aid in, the folks who have no political dog in this fight, have said that if they go into Rafah, you could lose up to 85,000 more Palestinians in 6 months. I think that is morally unjustifiable and unconscionable. Yeah. And as we make our way to the holy season of Ramadan and Passover thereafter, I hope people will dig deep into the moral cisterns dug by ancestors, that they will reach toward the highest ideals in our humanity, center the children, and find our way to that path that leads to peace.
Senator, finally, let me just ask you about another developing story in your state. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis could be thrown off of Donald Trump's 2020 election interference case in Georgia after admitting that she had that personal relationship with the lead prosecutor, though she argues there was no impropriety. Do you think that relationship undercuts the integrity of the case, and should she step down?
Listen, we are watching our judicial process play out. And I know that there are folks, unfortunately, in the state of Georgia, politicians, who are trying to put their hand on the scale. I'm not going to pile on. I'm not going to add to that. I will watch this process play out, and we will see where the chips fall. But at the end of the day, here's what Donald Trump deserves. He deserves to have a fair trial before a jury of his peers, and in this case, as voters of Georgia. And we need to see that play out.
And given that, do you think that the optics have become so complicated around this that Fani Willis should step down for the better good of the case that you just talked about?
Well, listen, I think this case is being played out before a judge, and that judge will have to make a decision not based on optics, but based on the law. And that's the wonderful thing about America. We believe that no one is above the law, including Donald Trump.
All right. Senator Raphael Warnock, thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.